A Possible Life is a novel in 5 parts, and each of the parts is set at a different time, in a different place, and has a different main character. So initially when you look at it, you might think these are 5 separate narratives, or 5 short stories almost. But as you go through, you can see how they are tied together. And there are small ways in which they're tied together, little circumstantial things, the same house, various important things in different parts of the book take place in the same house. And over the years, this house may have been once upon a time an institution, and then later on it becomes a flat that someone buys, and so on. But what really ties it together, it's all about the same thing, which is about the choices we make in our lives and how things might be different if we make other choices. It's about the instability of human character and all sorts of things like that. And the first story is set during the Second World War, concerns a young Englishman, a rather naive guy who goes off and finds himself in a concentration camp where he's been sent, but really by mistake, not some sort of procedural misunderstanding. The second one is set in the 19th century, the second part of the book, in a sort of slum in London, a boy in a workhouse. The third part is set in the future, in Italy, and it's about an Italian neuroscientist, a woman who discovers this great secret, which is how the brain works, what makes us different from other beasts and creatures. The fourth part is set in France in the early 19th century about an illiterate servant woman called Jeanne. And the fifth part is about a pop singer in California in the 1970s, a kind of singer-songwriter type. And so, as you can tell, they're all very, very different. Yeah. But they all hang together. But right. Some people prefer to read them as separate stories, but to me the whole thing only really works if you see how they hold together. I chose the structure because, as a way I choose all structures, is that I choose the structure that seems to me to best express or work best for what my book is about. And since this book is about human consciousness and how unstable it is, and how our idea of who we are and who other people are is so provisional, then it seemed to me that a way of breaking it up was a good dramatic way of demonstrating what the book is about.
So do you mostly know what your book is going to be about before you start writing?
Yeah.
You have a sense of theme, or a sense of just, is that what you're exploring when you...
Ideally, you want really to know what... So I always know what the theme is, what the big idea is, what I want people to sort of talk about when they've finished it. And then I usually have a sense of where I'm going in terms of the plot. And my books are not particularly plotty, but they do have a beginning and a middle and an end. So I know that I'm going in this book, say, from Paris to Moscow, and I know that I will be stopping in Berlin and Budapest, but I don't know all the stops in between. So that's really the way I look at it. And you hope that your characters will give you some help as you go along, and that some situation will give rise to another situation that you hadn't quite foreseen, and that these will provide all the incidental things along the way. But I do tend to follow an overall route, and until I've got something worked out, I don't really feel happy about starting, because you don't want to spend 2 years and then find that you didn't, the sat-nav was all off and you didn't know where else you were going anyway.
It's fascinating the difference. But I was talking to another writer, and she had a completely different approach. That's what she does almost. She wrote just fragments and then figured it all out later. It's interesting how everyone takes a different.
I don't think there's any set rule for it, but I think you can normally tell when a writer's taken the let's get in the car and see what happens approach. You get a different kind of book. The answer is I don't know a great deal about these new technologies, but I mean what I do know is that they have dramatically different effects in different countries, and to children particularly who are in villages and communities where they haven't had much access to books and education, they can easily be a lifeline. And I think it's all very well for people like me in London to say, we fear what this is doing to the traditional novel and all that, and it's closing down local bookshops, which indeed it is. But at the same time, it is a lifeline for people, what these new technologies can do and how they can disseminate information so rapidly and so cheaply, so that some poor child in a poor village in a remote country district of some developing country can get access to a Harvard Business School introductory lecture online. I mean, you can't be sneering at that. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. How that then converts into that child becoming someone with lots of opportunities and a big grown-up job somewhere else, I don't know, and I think that's a hurdle yet to cross. But the democratization and the opening up to information that the internet can provide, and the access to self-expression that it can provide through people being able to publish their own stuff. I think we're in pretty early days actually as to how that's really going to work out. But it's carry on.
So I was wondering also, whether it affects so it wouldn't really affect necessarily in any way how you would approach your writing.
No, I mean, I still write, expecting the book to be produced in an old-fashioned way and to be disseminated in an old-fashioned way and so on. Though I know that quite a lot of my books are now sold as eBooks, but I don't think it alters the way you write or the way you think about writing in any way. But I think to another generation, people younger than me, people in their 20s now, perhaps it will. I don't rule out at some point somebody who understands these things better saying to me, look, let's think of a different way of publishing your stuff now. Let's do it chapter by chapter. Let's cut out the publisher and the agent completely. I hope my publisher doesn't see this, she'll be absolutely destroyed. But I think, you have to remain open to that. And I'd certainly quite like to experiment with something, just try publishing something in a different way. I mean, it would be outside my contract with my existing publisher, but I'm open to trying.
Okay, and in the context of the various books that you've written, aside from the stuff that you've written that's I say yours, but you've also written two sets of things that are parts of the series. So one was a James Bond book, and the other one is the new PG Woodhouse that's coming out very soon.
Yes, it's beginning of November, yeah.
Can you tell me just a little bit about, both of them, and also why you've chosen to do that?
Yeah, it's an odd thing to do. To write someone else's book, and there's really far too much of it about now. It's become a bit of a sort of epidemic, and I don't really approve of it, so obviously that's a very inconsistent thing for me to say. The James Bond thing just came, it was the centenary, and I was offered this thing, and it was a lot of money, and it sounded like a lot of fun, and I just thought, why not? James Bond was great fun to me when I was a child, first of all reading the books and then going to the films. And it seemed a sort of great British institution, and I didn't necessarily think it would be easy, and it wasn't. It's not the kind of book I read. I don't read thrillers and action things and spy stories. Some spy stories are much more literary than others, obviously, but when I read the books again, they worked pretty well, and I just thought it would be fun to do. And having done that, I went back to my own stuff, and I've written 2 novels of my own since then. And I thought, well, I would never obviously want to inhabit some other writer's skin. And then so when the idea of doing the PG Woodhouse came up, I said, great idea, but no thanks, I've done that. And, it'd be far too difficult, because Ian Fleming's prose style works well in the books, but it's a fairly simple thing, not that hard to get the hang of. But PG Woodhouse's prose style is, a thing of beauty, and has thousands of people have been pointing out to me ceaselessly on the internet. One ended up, this is an act of lunatic folly. This is presumptuous, preposterous, arrogant. Who does this fat bearded git think he is? I've taken a lot of abuse, of which has actually amused me a lot, largely because I sort of agree with it. I mean, not about being fat, obviously, or a git, but it is a rather presumptuous thing to do. But it is offered in a spirit of homage to Woodhouse and a spirit of thanks for all the fun that his books have given to me and millions of others. And it's also supposed to be a reminder, really. Particularly to people of the younger generation. They may have heard the name, but they may not have read the books. And they may look at mine because they've heard of my name and not his. And then when they look at mine, they say, well, this is okay, so now let's get the real thing. And then they go back to him. So that's the idea.
Fantastic. So, and are you happy with what you've produced?
I'm happy that his family are very pleased with it. So that's the first hurdle, really. And I will only be happy if people enjoy it and take it in the spirit in which it is offered. But we'll have to see whether they do.
Do you, when you're doing this sort of thing, and even actually with your own fiction, do you think much about your readership or readers as you produce what you produce, or is it very much your own exploration of?
Well, it's both. I mean, I think I see it as a kind of triangular relationship, and I'm very uncompromising in what I write. If you think of a book like Human Traces or a book like Birdsong, it's not that easy in some ways. I mean, there are passages of Birdsong which are very, very difficult to read. And I don't think of the reader in terms of trying to make things simpler for them or sort of soften things or appeal to them. I'm not begging readers to like my stuff. They can take it or leave it. But at the same time, when you are writing, I mean, part of the deal is that you're talking to the reader, sometimes almost behind the back of the character. I am aware of what, has the reader had enough of this yet? What are they thinking? And, I'm trying to manipulate their response to some extent, while at the same time not betraying the character and their life and what they're doing. But I think it is a three-way thing, and I think authors who are completely unaware of the reader, I think that's slightly unwise. But it doesn't mean to say, as I say, that you're not pandering to anyone, but you're just aware of them. It is a dialogue, and I learned this from reading myself, because all writers are readers. All writers are voracious readers, really, before they ever pick up a pen to write. And some of the novels I enjoyed best were where I felt I had a very special relationship with the writer, that we'd sort of almost shaken hands, as I say, when the character was looking away. So it's a hard thing to describe, but I think readers of novels will understand
that, because you obviously have a lot of readers. I mean, you have a tremendously successful trajectory in terms of your
which has always surprised me, really, because, as I say, I do think of myself as uncompromising, and some of these books are not that easy to read. But maybe it is because I do bear the reader in mind. I don't know. It's not for me to say.
Okay. What's your future projects now? Anything?
Well, I have just started another novel of my own. I say this to you, never going to do a novel of someone else's in someone else's voice. Again, it's been fun. I've enjoyed both the two I've done, but I wouldn't do that again. So I'm starting now a book set in the 20th century, spanning most of it really, from about 1920 to 1980. A male protagonist, and it's about all sorts of things. It's really about the great drama of the 20th century and what had we done to deserve that extraordinary century, and is it too late? We need to get to grips with it, really. I mean, it's just like this great trauma, really, and we need, I think, to think a bit more about it. But it's not a sort of didactic book. I'm not trying to make it sound rather so heavy weather. It's dramatic, and it has a strong narrative.